This is Jesse Hensley.
And this is Josh Turner.
Welcome to Turn Down for What? Welcome to Turn Down for What? I'm Jesse.
And I'm Josh Turner. We got an exciting one today.
Mm-hmm.
We are partnered with, and on the line, we are doing our first co-podcasting.
Ooh, okay. To the Wyoming of Canada.
To the Wyoming of Canada.
Yes.
We have two special guests with Nerdish, Nerd News podcast. Introduce yourselves.
Hi there. I'm Kristian Schoberg. I am one of the co-hosts of Nerdish Nerdy Nerd News here in Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan.
That's awesome.
I love that.
And my name's Jess Halsworth, and I'm one of the other co-hosts of the Nerdish Nerdy Nerd News.
We are very excited to
Jess and Jess. Yep. You know, we both can get rid of you all and just go ahead and do our own
There's
thing.
There's 3 J's and 1 K, which is good. It's better than the other way around.
3 K,
3 Ks and a J.
You don't want to look up online anywhere either. You know? What's this video? 3 J's and a K. Oh, no, don't do that.
Well, we are very excited to have you guys join us today and to be joining you guys. So we had the discussion in the weeks leading up to this conversation around some of the differences and some of the uniqueness between some of the setups and things that are in Canada. For all of our listeners, I'd encourage you to go listen to the most recent episode they had on solar. It's a good conversation, some insight that they had in regards to some of the solar setups and some of the way that it works in Canada. But they also have spotlighted some about the electric vehicle industry, not only in Canada, but in the United States. And so we see a unique opportunity to kind of have a dialogue around the differences, but also some of the
similarities, kind of like our hairstyles. I mean, great design, great choice. Right. I mean, it's perfect.
We were saying before you got here, since you were late today,
I can look at my calendar again.
For the record, Jesse was late today.
Look, it still has not showed up. We're supposed to be here at 2:30, Josh. So,
but yeah, so I'm the only one with hair.
Well, a frohawk, I wouldn't really call that hair, but
he does trim his hair. But yes.
All right, so now we're going to get off of the mild comedy that he's trying with and go into some nerdy nerd stuff, which is obviously solar. And one of the aspects that I think everybody likes is the idea that you could be at your house and during the daytime make your own power. I think that is kind of a goal, but it's financially today not as easy to be reached. But if you could sit at your house, regardless of the environmental impact, let's say that there is no benefit or at all. But we know that if you're making it that way, there probably is a very good environmental impact. But let's just say the common person is sitting at home, and at the end of the month, they will have no power bill that they have to pay. I think that is something that everybody could look at and say, yeah, I could get on with that.
It is really nice. I have my solar set up here, and I've had it for just about a year now. Actually, it would be October of last year is when we got it fully installed, and I've got a big enough setup that.
And I'll let you give a refresher, since our listeners may not have heard. Give a very brief overview of your experience with solar and how it works with the grid connection where you're located.
So we have a system here where we don't get a 1-to-1 ratio, so you don't create one and get a credit for one. That just doesn't make sense financially from a business perspective for our power company to be paying out like that. So we actually only get 2-to-1. So I put 2 into the grid and I can take 1 out at no cost. So we've got to make a little bit bigger solar arrays here to balance that out.
And what's interesting is where we're located most of the time, all of our solar is behind the meter. And so most people have the power walls that they're charging, and then they have the opportunity to backfeed the grid in certain situations, but it takes specific agreements with the local municipality. Whereas where you're located, if I'm correct, from what I was understanding in your last episode, was you basically sell back to the meter no matter what, and then it's always a net acquisition back.
Well, and you can have battery systems. It's just that the cost for the battery systems really outweighs the
Yeah.
sort of the cost benefit of selling and buying back at that 2 to 1. So
And the power company here doesn't give me enough credit to make it a $0 bill. I still have to pay my tie-in fees, which are like $29 a month. So I've still got that, which is a small amount to pay to have an unlimited backup source.
Mm-hmm.
So
And are you on the average generating, and I guess getting more credit
yes.
than you actually spend?
Yeah, I've got a 17.8 kilowatt system on my roof
Okay.
with an 11.4 kilowatt inverter.
So am I correct in saying then that generates something like 80 kilowatts a day?
Roughly, yeah.
around the
On a
sun
good
side.
day,
a lot.
on a good day, on a really good day, like come October and November, and then March and April when it's cooler, the panels perform way better. I've had days where I was at like 110 to 120 kilowatts in a day.
Wow.
Yeah.
On that type of system. So, something that I thought was interesting from the episode that you guys spoke on solar was the research showed that your region and going down into the upper end of the United States actually had some of the best locations
potential. Yeah.
for solar potential,
Mhm.
which intrigued me because you would think that being that far north and not having the sun as much as you would on a more southern location year round. I mean, it does balance out, I guess, in the long run.
You have to sort of look at it over a period of the 12 months because
Yeah.
in winter time, like we're heading into where the sun will be down at 5 o'clock and it doesn't come up until 10 a.m. again. So you got a much shorter period and it's much lower in the sky. So you don't have as much direct sunlight.
But your summer times, you get some really good,
Yeah.
really good capture.
Well,
Now,
then we'll have days where the sun comes up at 4 a.m. and it doesn't go down until like almost 10:30 at night. So
And that's when you get those big cabbages you see where they've had this huge cabbage that's the size of like a truck bed. And it's like, how did they grow that cabbage? And now, what happens if you have something that has a bidirectional battery? Obviously, Chevy does this now in their new vehicles that they're going to be coming out with, or at least their truck. RF-150 Lightnings have the ability to then plug into the house or whatever, and we can use the power on the battery. Say you're sitting there at the house and you're creating this 800 kVW and it's being stored in your truck or car or whatever. You're not going to use all that in the day, throughout the day.
Right.
So is there a chance that if you're working from home and you have your truck sitting there charging off your own solar, that at that point you don't have to do double to get the ratio of 2 to 1? You just have to pay your tap fees, so to speak, in that case?
Yes, but we don't have currently we don't have in our province here any rate changes. So it's all the same rate day or night. Like there's no peak times or anything like that. So that makes a difference.
Okay. Yeah.
And you said the person that featured on the episode, I don't remember his name, but his province was 1-to-1, wasn't it?
So our province actually was originally when they came up with the program 5-6 years ago, and they had set aside 2-3 years of doing this, and then they realized within the first year all of the spots got like applied for and taken up because everyone knew this is a great deal.
Yep.
I'm getting 1-to-1, and they all got scooped up. All the slots that they had set aside for 3 years got scooped up in like 7 months. Because a 1-to-1 ratio like that is just.
It was sort of a trial to see how it would work and how they could integrate it and how it would be in business sense. And they found 1-to-1 doesn't work for a business for them.
I mean, you're net at a zero as a company. I mean, they're making their taxes and their connection fees, but it doesn't make any sense as far as the actual acquisition of power.
Lost those allocations quicker than a Taylor Swift concert.
Well, and just as a reference, our rate here in the province is 14.89 cents per kilowatt.
Is that Canadian? Is that Canadian though?
US, that's 10.98. 10 cents.
Wow, that's cheap.
11 cents. Yeah. And that's any time of day. So back to what you'd asked there, Jesse, is about using a vehicle as like a power wall. Yes, you could do that. Absolutely. It's very possible.
Like yours though, Jesse, too, and Josh, your F-150s is you still have to physically go out and plug into it, right? Like it doesn't backfeed through your chargers.
The Bluetooth option does not help. Unfortunately, I've tried to get Bluetooth power, and it never wants to connect. So
But
I don't know why.
Ford in their systems has designed it where you still have to have an additional power wall, but that connects into your charger. So
Gotcha.
it is actually back feeds, but you have to have the Ford Pro charger.
Yeah.
But then once you trip the system, it then pulls
Push of a button.
It pulls from the same cable that you're charging into
Okay, so you don't have
it
to
makes
through
your
the
existing battery
charger.
system
Oh,
deeper.
that's good.
Gotcha.
No.
Yeah. And see, that's one reason why we're looking at this. And obviously, battery storage is a big thing. You know, how are we going to have battery storage in these different provinces? Because you make it during a certain time of day, what happens at nighttime? And then you look at the cost of these large scale batteries. And so how can we get this price cheaper? So one thing we're exploring, and hopefully we can work with Ford and GM and others on this, is we know roughly that a battery pack for like one of these large trucks for 170 or 130 some kilowatts is around $22,000. And what would happen if you took 5 of them, daisy chained them, stacked them, put them in a container, and you use that as your community backup for, say, a half a megawatt or a megawatt, or even like a large medical building or something? Could you use these type of systems, just take them exactly out of how they are? Because now if you're selling more batteries like that for these car companies, you have more assets, and it should lower the price overall because you have more of this going out. And I think that's what Tesla's done with their power power walls. Is I would assume that the infrastructure is very similar to that of a Tesla vehicle, and in doing so, you're basically making everything else cheaper because you're making these big power bricks. And that's one thing that we would like to try to do with our systems, just to make more money for the car companies and give a secondary use of that as well.
Yeah. Well, and we've got, actually just yesterday they announced here in Canada another EV battery. Northvolt is building a multi-billion-dollar plant in Quebec. Just
I wonder
last
why it's
year.
not Southvolt. Sorry.
or something French. I mean, come on, it's Quebec.
Oui.
Oui, battery.
There we go. You've heard it here first. Oui batteries will be coming out 2024.
That's Jessie on the average.
Yeah,
day.
they'll have a yellow case on them, so you can really tell that they're wee-wees. So,
That's
and then there was one.
day.
There's last year there was a Nexstar Energy is currently building an EV battery plant in Windsor, Ontario. So right across the street from Detroit.
We're seeing a lot of, even Tennessee itself in the nation, for the United States, it has like one of the central hubs for development for future EVs.
Yep.
We have Nissan that's developing the Leaf here. We have Ford that's doing the big blue oval, like $4 or $5 billion center over close to Memphis. South of Nashville, there is
EV battery plant for General Motors.
General Motors has an EV battery
Springfield
plant. Yeah.
Yes. And then you have Volkswagen, which is doing EVs, and they're actually doing a $500 million plant for EV batteries in
Illinois.
No, where one of the charging stations, Athens.
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
So they're building one there as well. We have lithium mines now starting to come up around the region here in South Carolina or North Carolina.
Yeah, we have huge investment in lithium mines here in Saskatchewan. They said they found lithium deposits that like basically are some of the largest in the world.
We've got a lot of oil, derelict oil rigs and stuff, and they've started pumping water down into them, and found when the water comes back up, it's like super rich in lithium. So they literally don't even have to dig anything. We've got 2 or 3 big lithium companies that are like investigating the possibilities of reopening these old oil wells, abandoned oil wells, and just pumping the lithium
Water, yeah.
So pumping the water down, bringing it back out, extracting the lithium, and then pumping it back in.
Yeah. So there's no strip mining. There's no ecological change. You just see a pump station that
better
sends
for the
water.
kids.
I'm sure the science on it's a little bit more complex than just pumping water down. But
and it's not the first time that we've done solution mining in Canada. Like there's a lot of potash. Like there's several huge potash mines. That's how they do theirs. So the technology is already there.
Yeah, pot's not legal across the United. Oh wait, what kind of ash?
Potash.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I thought we were talking about
Potassium
something
mining.
else. There we go. Yep.
It can't take you anywhere.
Yeah. We only have bananas we import in for potassium, so that's kind of hard for us.
Yeah, the battery tech is something that we've discussed. I mean, this last week's episode that aired, we were talking about battery degradation, but I think, and we've mentioned this like 4 or 5 times on the podcast, but I think that the evolution of batteries is the next step forward. I think that they've done really good at developing the evolution of solar panels. We're actually in the process of right now of working on launching a solar manufacturing facility that makes panels, but the technology in them lasts longer. The energy capture is so much higher than the original panels, and the bifacial glass. I mean, they have like all of these things that really help the longevity of the panel. But then the big thing that we're seeing right now is battery tech is very expensive, very heavy, and that affects range. It affects price. Makes EVs unaffordable. Because I mean, one of the topics we had a few weeks ago was the affordability of EVs because of how expensive they are, and a lot of that's tied to the size of these batteries. Some of these companies like Escalade is producing their new Cadillac Escalade, and it's a 200 plus kilowatt hour battery.
A company called Escalade?
Shut up. Cadillac, for the record, is producing the Escalade. GMC had the Hummer, but all of these are 200 kilowatt batteries that are super heavy and super expensive. And so I really think that the evolution of battery through new technologies is where the future is headed.
And then you have BYD last week also announced that they have a $16,000 EV in China that you can purchase. 16 grand gets you a car though to go 256 miles for a small compact. Brand new BY.
Does it float? Can I float one over here?
For 16 grand, it really doesn't matter. You can buy a boat, put under it. So
just get a shipping crate and put 4 or 5 of them in there.
Yep.
I mean, when we did our solar episode, we kind of went through the efficiencies of solar and stuff. And I mean, even as you guys are looking at it, like 2012 panels were 17% efficient.
Yep.
And then moving into like 2019, they're now 39. 2019, they were 39.2%. So, I mean, that's a huge increase in just, 7 years. And
we're looking at 51% for a 550 watt panel. It's going to be 4 foot by 6 foot, weighs 61 pounds. So it's big.
It's heavy.
But it's heavy. But you're looking at a very long duration panel
and
as well.
Instead of being backed,
double glazed too. It's backed on both sides.
It's bifacial, and so the longevity of the panel lasts, because a lot of times you see that when you back it with other materials, you don't really need. There's not really any benefit, for the sun coming through, but the expansion of the backing.
Yeah, the thermodynamics and expansion of that.
It causes the degradation of the panel quicker, the loss of efficiency quicker, the need for replacement quicker. So by actually adding to the weight, but by doing the bifacial glass, it will actually assist in the longevity of the panel. But then it's going to be very easy to actually recycle the panel because all you do is basically run it through a grinder, and you can salvage all of the
heavy metals and.
Yeah, there's very little of the metals in it, but the sand.
Silica?
Thank you. Comes out pure, you could reuse it in making another pane of float glass.
Yeah. Scientist over here.
Jesse, are you just there for good looks or what?
That's all I'm doing. I'm trying to follow the pathway he's trying to lead me into to make himself sound better. Now, you're talking about the ingots as well. So the ingots is one of the big problems with these. Where are you going to build the ingots at or grow the ingots at for the solar cells? Where are you going to cut these ingots at for the solar cells? And we're actually working with a group out of Virginia who is trying to tackle that problem as well. And they're also, I believe everything is done for their glass plant, for the pour plant. So that's where we'll be getting our glass for our systems as well.
Because one of the biggest things, and I think you guys highlighted on this, one of the biggest issues that we have is all of the solar panels come from China. We have U.S. panels that are shipped in, framed in the U.S., and they say, here's a U.S. panel. But it's like, it's
take it, put a stamp on it, say, there we go.
Yeah. And I mean,
stamp.
You see politically that when you deal with the politics of solar, you see the argument made that, hey, you're basically funding solar projects that benefit China. And it's not necessarily untrue because, you know, if you issue a grant for, let's say, $100 billion for a ton of solar, you're basically giving $90 billion to China for panels. And then, I mean, there's the benefit.
We get the crumbs.
We get the crumbs of it.
We need to bring manufacturing back to North America. Like,
yeah, absolutely. But
Yes.
the panel manufacturing is just something that is not done here. And there's a way to do it that's cost effective. That is, when you deal with shipping glass across the Pacific, that's not I think that they factored in 20%
loss,
breakage,
yeah.
20% loss. Imagine cutting that loss out.
I'd be a glass hole if that kept happening to me all the time.
Oh Lord.
So when's Power Up Canada going to get started? Like, I see Power Up America, but like, come on, guys.
Well, we have the vision. So we have Power Up Data. That is our edge-based co-location data center. You have Power Up Solar. That is our solar manufacturing facility. Yep. We'll probably have one called Power Up Moose, and that'll be our Canadian, division.
No, it's Power Up Wee Wee.
Oh, that will be our yellow logo too. So
don't
little
Google
drips
that.
on it. Yeah,
Power Up Wee Wee. Definitely don't. Yeah, you might get some bad results.
Sounds like something I'm going to need by the time I'm 70. Something that'll be our diaper division.
Blue pill. Yeah,
you already need it, buddy. Let's be honest.
Listen at him. Yeah.
Anyways, yeah. So we also have Power Up Aero, which is
there are airports. Now that's one thing. I don't know if you've had that on. And again, I've listened to some, but I've not been able to go all the way back on your podcast. The airport part of this is very exciting for us, and it's an area that is growing immensely. And when it starts coming down to mobility and the cost to get from point A to point B in a VTOL or electric VTOL, the amount of savings here is huge. So in a regular aircraft, you're looking about $650 roughly an hour in jet fuel for like a small air taxi. And then when one that is EV based,
we're referencing like a Cessna size plane.
Yeah. So you get down into a one of these aircraft and you're looking at $70 an hour for the same amount of time.
Yeah.
So, and yesterday or last week, the military made an agreement with Joby, I believe, and that aircraft will go 200 miles an hour. I think it's 100 and some miles per charge today. But obviously, that's today. What's it going to be in 2 years? Especially if nobody thought about this 3 years ago. I never knew that there was EV aircraft. Who would have thought that?
Yeah.
Now, what happens if you get the solid state batteries that go into these things and you can get 300-400 mile range and you can land vertically? You'll be able to take that thing anywhere. And that is kind of the regional mobility that we're excited about. And we're working with programs through Tennessee and Virginia as of right now, Vermont up near your way. And that is definitely something that when you start looking into Canada, there's a lot of open spaces. And this is something that definitely could be used in that area as well.
Regional mobility, that's something we talked about when we hosted Whisper Aero. The regional mobility solutions opens up the world, especially in rural areas. So, our conversation with the officials that we've had in the airport space and in the FAA and things like that has been the regional mobility solutions that are provided in rural America. You can live outside the city 100 miles and taxi in if you have this affordable mobility solution. And so for areas like Canada, the current use case for the eVTOLs is currently urban areas. So for big cities to get from one side to the other, it could take 4 hours in traffic, whereas you could puddle hop a 5-mile trek on one of these little eVTOLs, vertical takeoff landing. Super low.
$10.
Yeah, $10. Yeah. Not a lot of energy, easy taxi services, and it's a good way to move people around. But then even with traditional takeoff and landing electric aircraft, you could utilize the regional airport solutions in rural areas. And then all of a sudden somebody can live 100 miles outside of Toronto, but daily commute into Toronto if they actually had a regional mobility solution. So it expands the world of allowing people to have
freedom
lives outside of
it
being
brings back the rural buses, right? Like,
that's basically what it is.
And we lost ours what, 15, 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Like, we don't even have rural buses here in the province anymore, like Greyhound and things like that, like you guys would have.
Yeah.
All that's gone here in Western Canada. So, it would be a huge asset for all these small towns and small producers that are, like you say, an hour or 2 hours out of a main center. Well, now you can go make a Costco run or a, grocery run to the big city to get the bulk foods and come home.
Yep.
And we see currently the largest strategic advantage when it comes to these things is regional freight delivery. Because, here I can order an Amazon package and it's here in 2 days. Sometimes it's a day. Sometimes it's like 8 hours. It's crazy how quick it works. But,
Again, those little blue pills he keeps talking about he ordered.
Yeah.
anyways, with that being the case, you're dealing with these companies spending a ton of money, but if they can lower shipping costs and or make it to where a lot of these rural areas can get the freight moved more effectively, then it declutters the road for package mobility, but also saves the company expense.
And the environment, because it is EV, it is electric, and we do have some electrification now going on at airports. We have one outside of Washington D.C. called Dulles Airport. They're putting $200 million into a electrification project that will be putting solar, EV buses, EV freight, EV everything. Our sites, obviously, we're going to be putting solar with ours. We can't get into too many details yet. We probably can in about 45 days of one of our sites that may or may not include airports, and probably be one of the earlier ones in the nation that has an EV option at an airport through these programs we're working on.
The big gap currently is that you have all of these companies wanting to bring electric airplanes online, but there is no network for the testing of these aircraft.
Right.
And so they're limited to take off, fly around your airport and land. But once we can have it's the chicken and the egg, what comes first, we have to actually create a network. And then we already have several of the larger airlines that are wanting to utilize the network for testing.
Come on, Jesse and Josh, you guys are going to destroy the infrastructure and the grid that we're tying into.
Oh, that's the good part about it. If I'm making my own solar with my battery backup, I don't touch anybody's grid. I'm going to save it for myself, and no one else can have it.
That was one of the big myths that we kind of crushed on our solar podcast, or our EV podcast, was we were looking back at we've had big jumps in technology as nations, both Canada and US. And you look back at the power consumption in the 1960s in the US, the total power created was 0.76 trillion kilowatts. Now that sounds huge, but just look at the 0.76, right? In the 1960s. By the year 2000, the power production in the States had increased to 3.8. So in 40 years, they'd increased from 0.76 to 3.8. That is a massive increase in 40 years. That's a 5-time increase in 40 years.
The hard part is that time period, though, you had a very cheap and reliable but polluting item that they could use. And today you really don't have that as much. See, back then in the 60s, you saw a lot of coal use. And regardless of people's feelings on coal, that's not going to come back. It's a hotter burning material. It was abundant. Especially during that time, you had a different type of coal, that burned a lot hotter than today's coal.
And they did produce, our dam network came up, in the last 50 years. I don't know when most of those were constructed.
From 1940s, some in the 1930s. We actually visited, and one of our charging station networks is right next to one of the first dam in the TVA system that was built in, I think, 1927.
But what we've experienced locally in our region, we're a part of the TVA Power Network, which is a 7-state a group that basically runs mostly hydroelectric, but they were heavy coal. They, based on environmental pressure through organizations, scaled back their coal production to they've cut it completely out.
And everyone is,
and they're working on cutting natural gas too.
Yeah.
And so they've been forced to look at hydro. So they're cutting back their power production and trying to ramp up. They're working on some nuclear projects.
That's where I think the whole
SMRs.
cue is. Yeah, the SMR, once you get the small modular reactor in place, which will take about 10 years for the total of it, that's when you're done. Because
your
people
base is covered.
Yeah, and people keep thinking, well, SMR is another nuclear reactor. It's going to have, it can melt down and everything. Well, they don't. It's not like a Chernobyl or a large scale reactor system.
Right.
We've used them in aircraft carriers and submarines, and Westinghouse has a very, very good system. It's a different type of technology.
We haven't seen an aircraft carrier go nuclear in the middle of the ocean, because I'm pretty sure that would make the news.
And the SMRs are designed in such a way that they can't melt down. They're not a high temperature, high pressure. They're designed, and the fuel that they use can actually be fuel rods that came out of other nuclear reactors.
It is exactly right.
So we're basically burning stuff that we've already burned.
Or it could be nuclear warheads. We have a place in Irwin that takes nuclear warheads and it diffuses the material into fuel material. Yes. So it's actually something that once we get that online, then we definitely won't have a power problem for a long time.
No, and that's what I was trying to get at, is like, even as that perspective back to the 1960s, yes, our fuel was coal and it was cheap. Well, we've got fuel like these SMRs.
Yes, that's it.
It's the next generation of essentially coal. It's free. It's already out there, and we can build that grid. It's not. People don't understand how small of a change we have to make to increase that grid to the point where it's, with all the EVs being built, it's not.
Well, yeah, and we're also, Josh and I have been talking to some groups. Again, it's an industrial company that makes forklifts, so that's about the best I can go with. And we're talking about biodirectional battery systems and microgrids, or virtual power grids. And a virtual power grid in this case would be, what if you're a company, say in Texas, and you have 30 150 kilowatt forklifts that are sitting there plugged into the wall. Right now, those batteries are not biodirectional. No. But say you're getting at 3:00 in the afternoon on a Saturday and the following day on a Sunday, and that grid starts going up and people are starting to lose their power. You can, at that point, allow those items to put that power back on the grid during that time. And you can get paid for it as it does it. And that's going to make the grid more reliable. That's going to give people more options. That's just a small example of, you don't have to put a lot of infrastructure out there. You can take the batteries off of those and put new batteries in and have a couple megawatts sitting there for your community when you need it, and you'll get paid back for it. And then at nighttime, you'll charge those back up at the low rate. And the following day, that Sunday comes around, you're not going to use your forklifts. Boom, there it is again. Same way with vehicles. What happens when you have 100,000 EVs on the road that can do this biodirectional? Right now they're talking about, well, we can do that if you want to or not. I don't agree with that. But I do think that, hey, I like money though. So once the grid starts going up, if I know I'm going to be laying at the house all day and I've got a full tank of battery, I guess a good way of saying a full tank of battery. People are going to love that one. At that point, can I sell that full tank of battery to my neighbor at a high rate? Sure.
Yeah, if you're like me, I work from home. I'm a teleworker. I work from home. The only time I get in my vehicle currently is when I'm going to go visit my parents or my family, go get groceries, or have to step out of the house for some reason. Otherwise, I don't leave. So my car literally sits in the driveway and does nothing.
Yep. And what if I'm making money off of it? What if if I make $50 that day because I bought it high and sold, or bought it low and sold it high, then I'm no different than a stockbroker. No. Yeah, I'm just doing it with power inside of my vehicle.
And if you think about a world in which you have 1,000 EVs in a city that is, connected and they have an agreement with, and all of those EVs agree that to plug in when it's not used, and they're available and accessible when the grid has high demand. Yeah. Assuming
or when there's let's say a tornado comes through and takes out the main line to the city. Well, now your city is still powered when
1,000 trucks like we have.
135 megawatts.
13 megawatts.
135 megawatts sitting there that you could pull from.
That's a ton of power on demand just sitting there. Ready to go. And so it could actually be more of a value to a community. I mean, 135
and that's the information we as as EV enthusiasts, that's the info we need to get out to people and make sure that they're aware that that is coming and that is going to be, kind of the standard, I think, moving forward.
The wee power grid.
The wee power grid. But yeah, I mean, that's something that the future of the sustainability of our grid not only ties into that, but that means that the EVs can be charging on off-peak hours and actually providing value back to the grid and stability to the grid as this very large-scale micro grid network, just pulling from each region. That way, whether you're in rural areas or in developed areas, there's a stability to the grid.
And the same way you're talking about that person who was saying, "Oh, it's going to kill it's going to kill the grid. It's going to kill the grid," is the same person that when the power goes out, you can say, "Hey, you can have my truck here. Let me hook up my truck. We'll have power for a week here. Let's go."
It's the same person who in the 1960s was going, "Oh, well, we can't all get air conditioners." Well, that's what happened in the 60s. That's why the grid increased, fivefold in 40 years, is because everyone put in AC. And the energy consumption, the internet came about. So now you've got computers running 24/7.
Yep.
One data center consumes as much as
we won't get stay off of my data centers, because
as a whole town would in an average day back then.
And what people don't understand is now everything is being controlled by AI when it comes to a lot of the AI compute. So once you start putting AI compute into the data center realm, people don't realize that's even a times 10 when you have AI capable data centers. So it's a different type of compute even at that point. I can take one cabinet that is maybe a 10 kW cabinet to run AI, a really smart AI on this system. You could have, a 50 to 100 kW system in that cabinet, probably water cooled at that point. So you're going to have even more power being spent on AI systems.
Yeah.
But I mean, the solutions that are coming, I think, is something that will be a huge pivot in the future. Yeah. Pivot in the future of the industry.
And I think those solutions are here too. I mean, hopefully y'all think so too. I think we know what we can do. We know we can do microgrids. We know we can do these systems. I think the hard part is trying to break some of the monopolies that don't want to see it. TVA is a great example. I love TVA. I think they've done a great job. At the same time, I cannot sell, if I have a 10-acre piece of property and I put 10 acres of solar on it, they're not going to buy that solar for what it's worth from me.
Yeah.
Without a lot of agreements, without a lot of programming,
you guys get a 2-to-1 tax credit usually.
Same way with a 2-to-1 tax credit.
And our network, that you basically buy power. Our rate's about 11 to 13 cents ish, US dollars. But
probably 2.5 cents.
If you get an agreement for the purchase of power, it'll probably be 3 to 4 cents.
We're lucky. That would be at peak times. We would get 4 cents. At the most time, we would be lucky to get 2.5 to 3.
The power companies have to balance that out too. Like I know here we've got a Crown Corporation, which is a government owned power company.
Nationalized kind of, yeah.
And ours runs 12% hydro, 10% wind. They don't even have a percentage for the amount of solar because it's so low. 39% natural gas and 35% coal. That's where the power for our province comes. So, I mean, they've got to balance that out too, right? So
the sheet that the CFI did, the A-Fleet tool, broke it down, but our network where we're located is like 80% now. It's like, I think it's 90 between natural gas and hydro. I think it's like 90% of the power.
TVA can produce 35 gigawatts of power.
With the hydro alone?
That's just gigawatts. That's a lot. That's a lot of power.
A lot of eggs in one basket, so too. You got to remember, right? Like hydro, what happens if those rivers start to dry up and you've got no water coming? I mean, look at Hoover Dam, right? And how low the water levels are. Yeah. Lake Mead and stuff. So
one of the really neat things that I saw, and I did a little research on it after the fact because I didn't see it in time for our solar one, is I think they're building one. I don't know where it is, Northwest United States, but the UK has one right now where it's in a higher elevation. They have like an artificial lake. So what they do
and
is
they pump it up to the top.
pump water up to there during
Yep.
when they're creating, and they have solar and wind and whatever, and it's all accessible. And then when the sun goes down and they have that demand, they just use it like regular hydropower.
We have one of those here. If you want to look into it, it's in Southwest Virginia, and what they do, it's a mining area, and I think even they had a mine that they were wanting to do that, pump the water up to the top of the mine and let the water come down into the mine. Very, very good way of doing it, and it's clean.
Yes.
It was actually very smartly designed. And again, it's creative solutions. It's looking outside the box.
If you've got the efficient pumps, if you've got the efficient enough pumps, you now have a natural battery.
Yep.
And it doesn't take a lot of construction. You just find a nice natural valley that's at a higher elevation, and you find, because there'll always be one that's down below, and you build your two reservoirs, and there you go.
Wee always flows downhill.
Yeah.
He keeps going at it.
There is the branding for the company right there.
Wee goes
always goes downhill. Patent pending. So
we'll send you wee all the way home.
Yellow River Power Production.
Oh man.
We digress so hard. Okay,
we do. Yep. We are not good at focusing the four of us.
Squirrel. Yeah.
My Lord. Well, I think this is a good spot to end this episode.
Okay. Yeah, I forgot about that.
And then we will pick back up next week with the continuation of this conversation.
And I'll be on time for that one.
Yeah, you'll be on time for that one, I'm sure.
All right. So this has been the first of 2 episodes of Turn Down for What?
With Nerdish Nerd News.
So close.
Nerdish, nerdy,
nerd. Okay. Have I said it wrong the whole time?
Yeah.
Nerdish.
I've not even tried.
Nerdish, nerdy, nerd news.
You got it there.
Nailed it. Done.